Do not fret. It only leads to evil. For the wicked shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. Well, today is our last sermon in the series on prescription for worry. And worry, quite simply, is anxiety or concern that's caused by the uncertainty of the possible outcomes in the future. We don't know what's going to happen. So we wonder, well, what if this? Or what if that? My company is downsizing. Am I going to be laid off? I just had a CAT scan. What are the results? And what if those results say, my insurance premium just went up 36%. That really happened to me for my home insurance this year. How am I going to pay it? Worry is not a sin. There's nothing wrong with worrying. And worry is inescapable because life is so full of uncertainties. But what bothers us so much as the uncertainty is the lack of control, isn't it? We want to be able to control the outcomes of life. Much of the anxiety and worry comes over the frustration over our inability to control things. And so we really don't like feeling like victims. We worry because we don't know the outcomes and because we don't control them. Well, Psalm 37 that we've been spending time with presents basically two fundamental approaches to worry. Two basic approaches. They're actually two approaches to life. But he applies those approaches to life to the issue of worry. One of the approaches is, you're on your own, do the best you can. You're on your own, do the best you can. We're very familiar with this approach, aren't we? Isn't this the way we approach so many of the problems in our life? We act as if there's not even a God or anybody else. We want to do it ourselves. Or we want to get somebody else to do it for us, but we know what we want them to do. This is the way of the world. Each person is for himself, him or herself. The other way the psalmist presents, the recommended way, from the perspective of faith in relation to God, is commit your life to God and trust in Him. Commit your life to God and trust in Him. In other words, instead of going alone, we face life with God. We share life with God. Life with God doesn't mean that God is just a part of our life, that we're religious, we go to church once in a while, we may read our Bible once in a while, and this kind of thing. We think of God once in a while. It's just sort of out there somewhere. It's a category of our life, but it means God at the center of our life. It means living our life as a joint venture with God rather than as a solo venture that we just have God as a little piece out here that we can use when we need God, right? That's what the psalmist is talking about. The psalmist uses the language of the wicked and the righteous to express the two diametrically opposed approaches to life. But you don't have to use those two terms or categories. They're basically two approaches to life that can be summed up quite simply as living with God or living on your own. Living with God is one approach to life, or living on your own. And since worry is about control and outcomes, let's focus on how these two different approaches to life apply to worry, to control and outcomes. We all want to be in control. We want to be able to control things, don't we, in our life? We want to be the master of our own fate, and we don't want others telling us what to do or what not to do. Wow, we really hate that. We want to control things. And this desire to control, part of it's just a part of being a person made in the image of God that has abilities. My gosh, we know things. We can make choices in life. We can chart our own path. Well, part of the desire to control is the uncertainty. It's a protective measure. Oh, if something I think feels as a threat to me in some way, is going to harm me or not be beneficial to me or cause me pain in some sort, then I want to be able to control that. So the control factor there is a protective thing. It's like you hold up your shield so the things will bounce off. That's a piece of it. But the other piece of it, the more positive approach, I guess, to control is we want to look after our own best interest. That is, our perception of our own best interests. We want to be able to control and manage the outcomes so that we come out ahead in everything. Isn't that a major part of the control? We want to control the outcomes so that our best interests, as we understand them, are advanced. And in the face of negative outcomes, we want to control the path to better outcomes. Man, this is going to be bad. I want to see if I can do something to make it better for myself. Even if it's not great, I want to see if I can make it a little better. And you know, this isn't bad. This is a part of life. It's a part of being a human being. We all want to control life, and there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But let's now look at the issue of control from the perspective of these two different approaches to life. Trust in the Lord and do good. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and God will act. Trusting in God, the psalmist means, is making God the reference point of your life, the anchor of your life. We talked about building trust and commitment in God as the foundation and the pillars of our life, the foundation stone. So whatever comes against it, it will be able to hold nice and solid about that. That's the trust part. But what goes along with the trust is our part. He says, and do good. Do good is doing things that contribute to well-being. We do things that are good for ourselves to contribute to our own well-being instead of doing something that are harmful to us. We do things that are contribute to the well-being of other people, to our company, hopefully also for any other area we touch, including at the ballot box. We want to do good, right? Contribute to the well-being and to our world. So we want to do good and contribute to well-being and to healthy relationships. That's what the doing good includes, relationships. The Bible, the fundamental relationship between God and humanity is a relational thing. It's about relationships. We want to do things that contribute to healthy relationships with the people in our house, the people at our work, the people in our neighborhood, and wherever we have any kind of presence or influence. We want to contribute to the good. And so while we're doing good and we're trusting God for the outcomes. When we do that, we do what we can do, all we know, the best we know, and we trust God. But then in the end, the control factor comes out. We're trusting God for the outcomes. So the doing good and the trusting God is controlling what we do and the person that we are and are becoming, and we leave the outcomes to God's hands. That's the relinquishing the control, the ultimate control. We control ourselves, not the outcomes. We entrust the outcomes and the control of things to God. God doesn't control us like robots. We're not marionettes with strings tied to us. We do the best we can and all we know. But then we trust God, and God does what we can't do. But we entrust the ultimate outcomes into God's hands rather than our hands. We control ourselves, not the outcomes. And why in the world would we do this? Why in the world would we give the control of our life and the outcomes of our life to God? For a very simple reason. Because God is trustworthy. God is more trustworthy than we are ourselves. We can trust God more than we can trust ourselves. You know what? Have you ever disappointed yourself? Have you ever fallen short of your own idea of yourself? Have you ever felt yourself to be a failure? God is more trustworthy than we are. That's why we give God our trust. We can trust God to protect us. We can God to look after our best interests. Do you know what? This is something that's really important to get clear for yourself. God knows what your best interests are better than you do. Our perception of our best interest is not the same as what our actual best interest is. God sees ahead of us. God sees behind us. God sees within us. God knows better than we know ourselves what is best for us. So when we trust our lives to God and give the control to God, we don't have to worry about the outcomes that is going to harm our best interests or go against us in some way, because God is trustworthy. more trustworthy than we are ourselves. And God knows our best interests better than we know ourselves. There is nothing and no one more trustworthy than God. So when God calls us to trust him completely and absolutely and give the control of our lives to him, that is the smartest thing we can possibly do. That is the most self-interested thing that we can possibly do. Now, the other approach to control, the other way of life the psalmist talks about, is we take control and we use whatever is at hand to further our interests, as we understand what those best interests are. That is, we approach life, we use manipulation and management. We try to manage life, all the stuff that throws at and all these details, and then we try to take whatever we can, whatever resources we can grasp our hands on, or whatever person we can use in any way to manipulate things the way we perceive our best interests are. I'm in control, but I'm on my own. I do what I have to do, period. Ethics and morals well, you know what, right? We look to the world system and how the world works, and we say, we're going to cooperate and use the world system. That's what they tell us is best. And we do the best we can within the system with our resources, but when those resources run out, we're on our own. Now, let's be real. This approach to life can produce good results. It can produce good outcomes, and the psalmist knows it. He says, do not fret over those who prosper in their way. Obviously, the righteous person is looking at the wicked person and saying, wait a minute, they're getting along pretty well, right? Do not fret over those who prosper in the way, over those who carry out evil devices. My gosh, they're doing this nasty stuff and they're still getting ahead. Do not be envious of wrongdoers. Why would a righteous person be? Well, there's some nice positive outcomes that come out of that other approach to life, right? We can use ungodly means to produce prosperity, fame, and good outcomes. You can use ungodly means and you can get there. I mean, it can look unfair. Why is the wicked, and the psalmist expresses, why is the wicked prospering and the righteous person suffering? Being God-centered does not guarantee worldly success. Following Jesus doesn't guarantee worldly success. Fame and wealth and all of that, and great health. It doesn't promise that. But when it comes to worry, this worldly approach to life is that we have to figure a way around or through some of the problem. And it operates on the assumption that the outcomes justify the approach. The end justifies the means. That's the approach to life. You're on your own, do the best you can, and it doesn't matter what you got to do to get there, you just get there. Now, on the surface, this I'm in control and I'm on my own approach seems very attractive. I mean, it resonates completely with our sinful nature, totally, right? But the psalmist looks below the surface to the depths, and the psalmist looks beyond the immediate present outcomes to ultimate outcomes. We've talked about control. Now let's talk about outcomes. The psalmist talks about outcomes from the ultimate perspective. You know, you cannot really judge and evaluate the outcome of something until it's been out there for a while and you see what the repercussions and the side effects are of whatever it is you've done. The psalmist is talking about the life of faith. He's looking at outcomes from the perspective of the end result. He's looking in the long term and not the short-term gains. The psalmist says, they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. God will make speaking of the righteous, God will make your vindication shine like the light. That is, that you chose the right way of life in this is going to be shown. You're going to be vindicated. And the justice of your cause, that is, it's what you did is the right thing, even though it didn't look like it in the short term, in the long term it will. The justice of your cause like the noonday. For the wicked shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. God God-centered living produces the best ultimate outcomes. If you're going to look after your own best interests, there's nothing better you can do to give your life to God and have a God-centered life, and that will produce the best ultimate outcomes in your life. In this life, as well as in eternity. I'm not just talking about heaven. I'm talking about in this life. And the best outcomes, the problem with us judging the outcomes and evaluating outcomes is if we use the world standards, of wealth and fame and notoriety and power and that kind of stuff, those may not be the outcomes. Those look attractive on the outside, but you know what the best outcomes have to do with? Let's be simple. I've ministered with enough people and observed life with people's lives enough to come down to this very simply. The best outcomes are related to health and relationships. Isn't that right? The best outcomes of life, the most enriching life, has to do with our having health, mental, physical, emotional health, and our healthy relationships at all levels. That's what makes life rich and full and abundant. The psalmist says, better is a little that the righteous person has than the abundance of many wicked. He's not saying it's wrong to have abundance, but he's saying, why be jealous of those outcomes that are the result of a life disconnected from God? That's going to fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. The outcomes of godly living contribute to the well-being of individuals, the well-being of relationships and society, and the well-being of creation. And God is the standard for evaluating those outcomes. God's vision for creation, God's heart, and God's character, that's what determines the ultimate worthiness of an outcome. When we trust in God, even the worst outcomes in this life, the worst news that you could possibly get, do not have the final word. Even death, war, tragedy, cancer does not have the final word. On the surface, Jesus died a condemned man, abandoned by his followers, with his movement in tatters, and the religious and political authorities thought they had gotten rid of the problem. No more worries for them. But 3 days later, God raised him from the dead. God vindicated Jesus. God had and does have and will have the final word. God has the final word in our lives. And God is in control of the ultimate outcomes. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. Nothing good comes out of consistent worry. In this case, harmful outcomes, the long-term outcomes, and the result of chronic and out-of-control worry are harmful. They're harmful for our health, they're harmful for our relationships, and they're harmful for society and our world. Now, we cannot avoid worry. And I hope you don't feel guilty for worrying. I mean, if I get on the way to lunch and I have a car accident, I may have some worries about the insurance deductible and other kinds of, or is I okay and stuff like that. Worry is a part of life. We don't feel guilty about worrying. The uncertainty and the lack of control in life rightly produces some anxiety and concern. But the psalmist is giving us an alternative approach to life as the context for dealing with that worry when it comes. We face life with God. We commit our lives to God. We make Him the reference point and the anchor for our lives. We trust ourselves and the outcomes of our lives and the best interest of our lives, and for those connected to us, to God. We do good. We trust God. We live faithfully. This gives us a healthy, sustainable way to deal with our anxieties and concerns. Why? Because we relinquish the control and the outcomes to God. We entrust our lives to God's goodness, God's wisdom, God's love. Or to put it in Christian terms, we deny ourselves, take up our cross, that is, we deny ourselves to the point of death if necessary, and we follow Jesus. We entrust our lives to Jesus. We entrust the outcomes and control of our life to Jesus. We accept the paradox that we gain our lives by losing them for his sake. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. Trust in the Lord and do good. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. This is the prescription for worry. Let us pray. Oh God, you are trustworthy. You know our best interest better than we do. You know what is best for us, and we can trust you. You want to share life with us out of love, and you just ask us that we respond with that love and trust. Oh God, I pray that you would help each of us to build our lives around this principle of giving ourselves to you and following you, making you the reference point, committing our way to you, doing the best we can, but then being still and silent and wait as we see you act and work in our lives and in our relationships. In Jesus' name.